I'd like to start by thanking our Icelandic friends at the consulate who've helped support this event. At Politics and Prose, we are dedicated to bringing people together in dialogue and intellectual discussion, and this is just such a beautiful manifestation of that. As you know, Politics and Prose hosts classes, trips, events, and programs almost every single day of the year. Here, I hear a phone. Okay. Here at our Union Market and our Wharf event and at venues all across town. In the coming months, we are hosting Garth Greenwell, Rebecca Solnit, Paul Krugman, Diane Rehm, and so many more. Please sign up to get our newsletter or check out our website for more information. But tonight, I'm very pleased to welcome Olaf Olafsson to Politics and Prose to celebrate his sixth novel, The Sacrament. The author of 5 previous novels, The Journey Home, Absolution, Walking into the Night, Restoration, and One Station Away, and a story collection, Valentines. Olafsson has dedicated his entire varied career to storytelling and narrative building in many different forms. In The Sacrament, he explores the realities of silence, secrets, and mortality through the story of Sister Johanna Marie, who is summoned to Reykjavik to investigate a decades-old death. Her investigations reveal more about the power of the church and about Sister Johanna herself than she ever could have imagined. But tonight, Olafsson will be in conversation with the ambassador of Iceland to the United States, Bergdis Ellertsdottir. She most recently acted as permanent representative to the United Nations, and before that, as Icelandic mission to the European Union. Please help me welcome them both. I got it. Sorry, I was just really worried about pronunciation, and then I just forgot the English. To Politics and Prose.
Thank you so much for this very kind introduction. It's so wonderful to see so many people from or supporters of the Icelandic literary scene, and I just want to thank in particular our friends from the Icelandic Writers Retreat. Erica, thank you for coming. She is in cooperation with our First Lady, the wife of the President, in organizing these events in Iceland. So thank you for being here, and all of you, of course, for showing up. And I must say this is an honor and a first for me. So I'm not a expert on literature, but I love books and I love to read. So I'm very honored to be here with one of the greatest novelists of Iceland, Olaf Olafsson. And I'm very much looking forward to a conversation. I think even if we will speak about the book that's being published right now, The Sacrament, I also think that we could maybe look at your career and other books you've written, your style, your methods, and things like that. So maybe I'll just start by asking you, Oliver, why do you write?
That's a good question. I've been doing it for a long time, and probably I write because I don't know any better. I started writing as a teenager, and I kind of resisted it more than anything. My father was a writer. So I didn't grow up believing believing that this was a bohemian exercise. It should have been a deterrent more than anything because it's hard work. But I think you're right because you need to. I don't think there's any other reason to do it. I published my first book. It was in Icelandic only when I was 23. So, and I'm a little older than 23 now, so I've been doing this for a while. But I think you do this because you have to. I mean, there's no. I don't want to make it sound lofty. It's not, as if it's a calling or anything. But for me, at least, it's a necessity.
Thank you. It's very. I mean, you have. I think all your novels, all your books, have been a success in Iceland, and I feel a bit like I've been stalking you the last few days because I've been trying to read everything I find on you on the internet, and it seems that all your books have gotten raving reviews in the US. And I read an interview with you in these stalking days of mine, in which you were very young. You were just starting out your career in New York. There was a picture of you, I think you were like 26 or something, my daughter's age. You know, you seem to be in like this oversized suit from the late 80s. And you were saying that Icelandic authors often wrote books that no one could understand, because that was the way they thought books should be written, to be serious, to be proper literature. But you have, you know, your books are breathtakingly exciting and understandable, and you know, you really, I just want to mention that his latest book, Innflytjandinn, which I received as a Christmas gift for someone who did not know that I would be doing this here tonight. And it actually destroyed my weekend, I was telling you before, because you can't put it down. You just start reading and you just, you know, I was like telling my boys what to do, like, yeah, no, yeah, do that. No, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just burn it, yeah, you know. And I just, is that what you want to do when you write? You want to entertain people, you want to have some suspense, you want them to not put the book away when they start reading?
I think so. I mean, it's you know, I thank God I didn't see the interview that you were referring to, but it sounds like it sounds like somebody a 27-year-old would say, right? But it's, to me, I mean, unless somebody picks up your book and latches onto it, I mean, you really haven't accomplished much, right? For me, it's somewhat of a selfish motivation when I start a book, because first and foremost I'm thinking about myself, and what I'm thinking about is, am I going to be interested enough myself in the characters, the subject matter, the whatever it is I'm dealing with, to want to spend 2-3 years with them. I mean, because that's usually how long it takes me. And I before I start writing, I always walk around with the characters and their stories for quite some time, because I found that if they don't survive that digestion period, it's probably not a good idea to pursue the characters and their stories. So before I sit down, you know, I have been living with them for a long time. I had been living with Sister Johanna for quite some time before I started writing the Sacrament, and I usually try to hold back when they, you know, sometimes I want to start writing and I sort of hold myself back because I want to make absolutely sure that, you know, this is going to hold. So hopefully if I succeed at making myself interested, you know, hopefully I'll you know, I succeed in making at least some readers interested at the same time. But I've never subscribed to the fact that literature has to be you know, inaccessible. That you know, you can't get everything you want to get across in a way that you know, captivates people, and that's what I try to do, and you know, I'm glad I succeeded with you this weekend.
Yes, thank you. I just want to, before we go further, is there anyone that is a time taker here? Oh, there's a clock there. Okay, fine. Because we also want to have time for you to do some book signing and for you to ask questions. Mm-hmm. But I think maybe before I start asking you more about your characters and protagonist, that's a hard. Okay, your main characters. Mm-hmm. Maybe you would be willing to read a few pages from your new book, from the Sacrament.
I'm going to read a couple of pages that Bergdis actually picked, and better get my glasses.
I just made sure that they wouldn't give anything away, because you know that's part of the story. That I don't know. Has everyone in here read the book? I see a hand, you know. So I didn't want to destroy the pleasure of reading and getting to know the characters and the plot.
You'll hear some Icelandic names in here. They are mostly street names, a couple of characters, and then a coffee shop called Mokka, which has been around for a long time. I should have known that my visit to Bergdis would have consequences. It wasn't difficult to imagine the ensuing conversation between Jenny and her husband, and his response was predictable. Perhaps she had tried standing up to him, found the necessary strength before finally backing down, as I suspected she had always done. Before the day was out, I had been summoned to see Bishop Johnson. Páll and I had driven straight from Bergdis to Vesturgata, changed our mind about stopping off at Mokka, as Páll had suggested earlier, although clearly he was still longing for a good cup of coffee. But I was fired up and wanted to get to Karolína Simonardóttir's as soon as possible. We parked in the same spot as before and walked back along the road toward her house, for the sidewalk was still covered in snow and ice. I planned to read to her from the letter and demand a response, but she didn't come to the door, and after knocking a few times, Páll looked at me and shook his head. I was convinced that she was home, had seen us approach or heard us talking, and I told him so. "What can we do?" he asked, and we left it at that. I felt I had been abrupt with Páll, who deserved better. So I suggested we now go to Mokka, as we had nothing else to do for the moment. Once we were sitting with our coffee and waffles, I relayed my conversation with Jenny, which until then I had been too upset to share with him. "Is that what she said?" he asked, unable to conceal his shock. "Are you surprised?" He didn't answer. I was relieved that none of his friends were among the other customers this time. We munched our waffles in silence, watching the people come and go. We reordered 2 espressos. I could tell that he was upset. I had been. Somebody mentioned when they read this book that this was a good advertisement for Mokka. The coffee is very good there, and the waffles too. So I decided that Sister Johanna deserved to go there quite a few times.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think because if I can reveal a secret, we actually went to the same, do you say junior college, or what would we call it?
Yeah, or high school or junior
college. High school,
college,
junior college, back in the day. And that Mokka was a favorite place for all of us. I think sometimes they could have, have sold more coffee cups if we hadn't stayed there so long. It's a small place, but it's not a big crowd here. So please, if you do go to Iceland, please go there. I wanted to ask you about your main characters, and I wanted to ask you a question because in the Restoration, which was published in 2012, and then in this book, The Sacrament, and then in this latest book of yours, which I hope will be published here soon, Innflytjandinn, or The Immigrant, the main characters are women. Is it because women are more interesting than men?
Of course. Well, I have written quite a few books where the protagonist is a man. The first book I wrote in the voice of a woman, and it was a first-person account. It was a book called The Journey Home, which was published about 20 years ago. And I remember when I got the idea and the character came to me, I said to myself, "Is that really a good idea?" Now, you write, of course, any novelist, populates his or her novel with men and women. So you're writing, if it's not your protagonist, I mean the characters, small and large, who are men and who are women. But I guess the leap for me was to do it in the first person of a woman when I did it when I wrote The Journey Home, and eventually in that case, the protagonist, the woman, just she wouldn't let me out of it. She kind of demanded that I write the story, and it happens then, and it happened with these books as well, is that sort of the character takes over, right? And after I get going, there's never I never have to question whether the character, a man or a woman, would do this, say this, behave this way, how he or she would react. It's kind of they take on a life of their own. So I guess when I broke the ice, if you want, with The Journey Home, and sort of say, well, what the hell, I'll write a woman in the first person. It's never stood in the way since. The gender has never sort of been an issue, and it just depends on what comes to my mind. What which character shows up, and with what story. I mean, that's basically how it goes.
Thank you. Also, a lot of your books are not just, I mean, even if they are on serious subjects, and there is always something there. There is a secret. There is something that people are hiding, and you gradually get to know what it is. But they all also have something with, they have art, they have, be it paintings or be it music, or even in your latest books, which is food, which of course is art if you do it right, Right. Is there a reason for this? Is it just your self-interest, like in sometimes in where the books take you, or?
It sometimes is, and the interesting thing for a writer, I think, when you spend this amount of time on a book, is you want to learn something yourself, right? You wanna dive into a subject matter that you may not have known all that much about, or not enough about previously. So, with Restoration, it was Italy during the war. It was art. It was restoration of paintings. With One Station Away, the book I published before, The Sacrament, it was locked-in syndrome and brain science. It's with The Immigrant. It's there's quite a bit of cooking. The main character there is a woman again, and she reviews restaurants. It's somehow fun. I don't think it's conscientious. I mean, a lot of the stuff. I mean, oftentimes and to be honest, when I'm asked about something in my books, and why I did it, or how it happened, and sort of the reason for it, I really don't know. So I have to come up with a reason, after the fact. Say, well, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. But oftentimes I just don't know. It happens.
I want to maybe turn to a more kind of maybe a more technical or a practical aspect. But I noticed when I was reading the Sacrament in English, I had read it in Icelandic before, and I was looking for the name of the translator. Right. It's an interest of mine, who translates things, and I didn't find it. Right. So why is that?
Well, the reason for that is that I do this quite a bit of it myself, and as you can see, there is a recognition of Lorenza Garcia in the book, and Lorenza has worked with me for quite some time. Vicky Cribb before her, and Lorenza does a rough first draft translation of some of the prose, and some of it I have. I mean, it's a strange process, particularly at the beginning of the novel. I will write sometimes first in Icelandic and sometimes first in English until I have the tone the way I want it in both languages. But Lorenza, she expedites things for me. So I'm sure I'm a bit lazy, but we have worked together for, I think this is the 4th book, and she knows my style, very, very well, and she, has been terrific to work with, and Vicky Cripp before her. So that's how I do it.
Thank you. I wanted also to ask you about, because you were talking about writing in English as well as Icelandic. So, and you have been for a very long time in the US. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say how many years.
Thank you.
It will, because of myself, not because of him. So how much of your sort of heartbeat is still Icelandic and not a New Yorker?
Well, I think my heartbeat is very Icelandic. I don't, I've never thought of myself as anything but Icelandic. Now, I've lived in New York for over 30 years, so I can say I'm a New Yorker. But the good thing about being a New Yorker is that you can still be, something else, right? And as most people are in that city, so it's a comfortable coexistence, I think.
Because I was referring to this very old interview with you, in which children were also mentioned. Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, and I'm looking at your wife there, the talk was of 6 kids, and they should all be raised in Iceland. But I wanted to ask you, because in all the interviews I've read, with you, is always this, people are asking you, how can such a very successful businessman, and everyone knows that businessmen in the US, they work, 24/7 or what have you, also be an accomplished and successful writer. And then I started thinking, the woman I am, and the Scandinavian, or what didn't Björk sing something like, oh, how Scandinavian of me? Mm. So, having 3 children, not 6, did that in some way influence your writing? Did it change you as a writer? And, most importantly, being a businessman and a writer, did it sort of have an influence on the time you had to write? This is a very personal question.
Yeah, so. No, I think having kids, and our oldest one turned 27 today. So I think having kids changes everybody, and I think it changes you, or maybe most fundamentally in that you now have, of course, in addition to your spouse, you have somebody who you find being more important than yourself, right? And I think that helps every novelist, and if we take executives in the business, I think the same applies to them. That a novelist needs to be more interested, in my mind, in other people than in himself, right? Because that's the only way you, I think, create characters that are real, and so I think it probably all hangs together, and I will argue that for executives, they need to be more concerned about the people they are responsible for, which are the employees, than of themselves, right? So I think it's sort of probably all hangs together, and I think with most people, I mean, having kids is kind of a if they didn't realize before that they are not that one isn't the most important thing in the world, then kids kind of confirm that.
Thank you. I'm going to give some time to all of you to ask questions, and I did have a question about how you approach kind of the empty screen, but it seems like that you walk around with your stories and your characters, and then when you start writing, that it's already there. So you are not like one of these writers stuck with the screen thing.
No, I mean the toughest time for me is always between books, and there is this empty barrel feeling when you're done. My wife will argue that I tell her many times that I am done when I'm not done with a book. I'm done this time, and I'm going to send it off. And then a week later, she asks me, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm tweaking a little bit." So there is once a book. I send it away. There is sometimes it takes a little bit of time for the characters to totally leave, their dwelling in my mind. But then there is this period of, what do I do next? And for me, that is what is worth getting into, and that's when ideas come and go. And as I said before, I try to sort of test them by living with them for a little bit before I start writing. But until I latch onto something that I think is worthwhile, that's the time of agony for me. Not when I get going. Once I get going, it's I don't have I don't blank. I don't blank a lot.
In the business you have been working in, for the 30 odd years. It's a very kind of fast-moving, you have to be really on top of things and on new technology and all of that. And we have all become slaves of our iPhones and, you don't remember anything, you just Google it and all of that stuff. And when we were growing up, you would know all the main writers. You would know who was, the prime minister of what country. You would know who is the Secretary General of NATO, what have you. There was this kind of knowledge you had. But I feel that nowadays we don't have any knowledge at all and nobody knows who is who. And people are very easily forgotten. Does it kind of make you frustrated as a writer? Because writing must also be something that you want to leave something behind. Mm-hmm. And in this world we live in, you somehow feel that people come and go, and the last scream of 2 years ago, nobody remembers today. I mean, is this something that you think about? Sorry for the philosophical.
No, it's a good question. I think books are those who are into books and those who read books. I think that's perhaps where they seek refuge from all the noise we all live with, right? And the amazing thing is, and I've been very lucky in terms of both in Iceland and here in terms of people being kind to me, readers actually being kind and reading my stuff. But it's surprising almost that books have held their ground as well as they have in sort of this in the evolving media landscape. I mean, the demise of the book has been predicted many times. I mean, from the days of the radio, and then television, and then video cassettes, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But today, I think, and today we, magazines are under attack, newspapers are under attack, television as we know it is being reshaped. So it's quite amazing that books have actually held their ground pretty much. And what's maybe particularly interesting is that paper. The physical book has actually held its ground much better than the electronic book. I mean, the electronic books have peaked and are now less popular than they used to be, whereas paper books have done pretty well, and that's quite remarkable given everything else that's going on. But as I say, I think people that's where people maybe seek a little bit of space away from the noise.
Refuge.
A little refuge.
Exactly. I think because talking about the book and the surviving of the book, I think that is maybe cue to asking you guys who are all here because you read books, if you don't want to, if anyone wants to ask Ólafur Jóhann a question about this. Yeah. Eyjafjallajökull, please.
Yes, at my mother's death, the family was discussing the mispronunciation of it, which shows that we're a sort of weird family. They were ambassador to Iceland for 4 years. How did you get from physics to writing like this? And why live in the United States instead of Iceland? You've raised American children.
Good question. Well, I came here. With me, a lot is happenstance. And I came to the States in 82 to study. And I wasn't going to come to the States. I was called to the headmaster of the high school we both went to one day, and he said, you've been offered a scholarship to the States. They will pay your tuition, room, board, stipend, etc. And I said, that sounds like a good idea to me. And I went to Brandeis University. Brandeis is a great international scholarship program called the Wien International Scholarship Program. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to study. Initially I thought literature, but then I looked at the courses, and I had read most of the stuff, and I had always been interested in physics. So I said, well, and there's a fantastic physics department. So I said, why not do that? So I did that for I did that for a while, and when I was sort of headed towards a PhD program, and I decided not to pursue it, my professor was angry with me. He thought he had a higher opinion of my abilities as a physicist than I did. Make a long story short, he introduced me to a former student of his who had gotten his PhD, and he was supposed to convince me to stay in physics. And he didn't, but he offered me a job in business, which I had never intended on going into business. I remember when I told my wife this, she said, "You in business?" And that was to her, that was the strangest thing she had ever heard. And I was going to do that for a couple of years. We moved to California in the mid '80s, and you get and became the two. And I said, well, try a writer. It's good for a writer to try different things and learn different things. And I'll do that for 2 years. And the 2 years turned out to be 30 or so. So so that's raising kids. I mean, my kids will tell you that they're Icelandic. They speak Icelandic fluently. They spend a lot of time there. One of them is living there right now. So, living in both countries, not so bad. Growing up in New York, not terrible. So, that's nothing was planned. I can tell you that much.
The best things in life aren't.
Yes.
I see we have another question.
Yes. The part of the book takes place in a Catholic school in Iceland.
Yep.
I've visited Iceland twice for short periods. I don't think I ever met an Icelandic Catholic. And I was wondering, in a couple of words, if you could give us a very short history of Catholicism in Iceland.
Well, they're not that. They're not that many Catholics.
I didn't think so.
No, it's about less than 10% of the population, I guess, is Catholic. The most famous Icelandic Catholic was Laxness, the writer. And I remember growing up, I always admired this. He was asked about something he had done. He converted, he converted at some point, and he was asked about something he had done as a young man, which I don't think he was proud of. And he said, the sins I committed, not believing correctly, do not concern me anymore. So I thought that was great. Now Icelanders are. I mean, if you ask, I mean, ostensibly most of us are Lutherans. Now, if you ask an Icelander to give you a dissertation about the difference between being a Lutheran and being a Catholic, I think most of us will fail. It's not a. I don't think Iceland is in general religious in that sense. I think there is I think we're religious, but in our own way, if you want. But you're absolutely right. The Catholic population is small. I don't know if you saw the church where actually the sacrament, some of it takes place.
No, I didn't see that.
Which is...
I always remember the huge church in Reykjavik.
Yeah, that's
the top of the hill,
Hallgrímskirkja.
but
Yeah.
that's Lutheran.
That's Lutheran, yeah, like most of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not too many of them, but
Right.
you know.
I thought Westman was settled by Irish priests.
Mhm.
It turned out not to be celibate.
Right. Right.
No, but
That
there
happens.
is, yeah, but exactly. No, but there is, the Catholic school and Catholic church are there, and a lot of people went to this Catholic
Yes.
school. The ones that were not
Not
in
Catholic.
Ellertsdottir,
Yeah.
not Catholic. My daughters went to this school actually, and we're not Catholic. So there was always, there was always an influence because we had nuns who came from different
Right.
countries in Europe. We had a French Catholic hospital.
Yeah.
I mean, they played a very crucial role in
Absolutely.
Iceland.
Weren't the first inhabitants Irish monks?
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that they have any ancestry there. exactly. Please, Mister, you have a question.
Certainly, thanks. So Olaf or Ambassador, maybe either of you could answer this. I went to Iceland last spring and I heard this really incredible statistic that was 1 out of 10 people in Iceland are published authors. And I just thought, well, that's incredible. But then you think about all the people who write books who never do get published. Right. So it leads me to believe that everyone in Iceland is, frantically writing novels and things. So I'm just curious, how is that possible? And I guess, what about Iceland makes everyone a writer? I don't know. Thanks.
Well, I don't know if that percentage is that high, but there are for a small country, there are a remarkable number of writers, and some of it I think is cultural. Some of it I think is the fact that the government actually supports writers. I mean, just recently it's debate, and every time the list comes out, there's some debate around it. But they basically writers get paid to do their work because writers in Iceland, most of them, would not be able to sustain themselves, even those who get published, on the royalties from their books. So actually, there is a system in place to support writers, and which is terrific. So yeah, I think we over-index, as they say in Iceland, but we do that in a lot. For a small country, you have to sort of over-indexed in a lot of different ways.
Anyone else? Yeah, I see.
Sorry to go back on what you just said there. So you're saying that the government of Iceland is subsidizing writing, and yet your largest industry, fishing, is not government subsidized? That kind of is very funny to me. Yeah. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Well, it's, Icelanders, they don't have to subsidize their fishing because, they have figured out how to make money doing it. Whereas I think the calculus is, and the economists have done all the numbers that basically show that the government makes money on this because they make money on things associated with book publishing, whether it's tax or there's employment that gets generated. It's a whole industry, right? So it's but without it, writers would not. I think most writers would not be able to do what they do.
Hi, thanks for coming. I'm wondering if there's anything you conveyed in the Icelandic version that you found wasn't really as easy to convey in English.
It's a good question. Actually, not. I think, I think it's pretty much all there. There was nothing particularly Icelandic that I left out because I thought it was going to be, alien or too foreign to readers who are not Icelandic, and I actually don't think I've ever done it in any of my books. Left something out that's particularly Icelandic. I have to sometimes, and I sort of prevent myself from doing too much tweaking, and not because I think necessarily that my tweaking would improve things, but simply because I get bored doing the same thing twice. But there's very little. There is actually there's very little in the Sacrament. I think I tweaked the ending, and when I say the ending, just the last 2-3 sentences, but didn't change anything really, except I had some fun doing it.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Do I see any more hands? Ah, yeah, there's one.
Hello, and thank you for coming. I just wanted to ask the question about your next book. Do you already live with your characters? And when can we expect to see them? I can't wait.
Thank you. I'm in that separation period now, and the reason my books usually come out in Iceland ahead of the U.S. is that, as with many things in Iceland, the process of publishing is very quick. So if I deliver a manuscript in June, the book is out in October. In the U.S., that's usually a year. It's just the process itself is it's a much bigger market. It's more complicated. In Iceland, we kind of benefit from being small and nimble sometimes. So I'm pretty far. I'm almost done with the Immigrant in English.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, would it be for you something that you would want to have simultaneous, or do you feel that, for example, the reviews and how people receive your books and stories is different in Iceland than it is, for example, in the U.S.?
I don't think it would be. To be honest, I'm kind of glad it's not simultaneous, because I think I'd be stretched a little thin. So it's usually a year or two between the books, and in other languages it can be even longer, because in all the languages my books are translated either from Icelandic or English. I basically tell my publishers that they can they can choose which language they want the books. When they're publishing it in Japanese or Hebrew or German or whatever, they can sort of translate from the Icelandic if they want to. They can translate from the English. So, no, I think it's actually nice not to have it all out at the same time.
I think we've exhausted the questions, unless there is any last minute someone who wants to say something. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you,
Olaf, for this very interesting talk. And I know all of you would want him to sign the books you have bought and are about to read. So I think, Olaf, you are available for that crowd.
Of course,
so thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.